Now, what is typical for the Xiaohe cemetery is that typical female yoni-shaped grave has a wooden linga in it. It is placed on the dead body or just next to it. Then there is the second variant of the suggested migration. So while some parts of the Proto-Germanic, Proto-Slavic, and Proto-Baltic tribes went directly to Europe through the Ural region, some part of them deviated and moved through the mountains of the Tibet and Hindu Kush and Himalayas to the Xiaohe region. We have this map of Mount Kailas, and the Indus River has its source just to the north of Mount Kailas. Title of my today's report is Terrain and Trace of Indo-European Dispersal, the riddle and its possible solution. So today I'm going to talk about the region to the north of Tibet. It is located in Taklamakan Desert. It is the Tarim River Basin. So this is the geographical map. The most important river of this region is the Tarim River, and the most important lake is Lop-Nor Lake in the eastern part of this plain. So I'm going to talk about the Xiaohe archaeological culture, which Xiaohe site gave the name for the whole culture. So this is the map of its location, Xiaohe Cemetery. Xiaohe means little river or small river in Chinese. So in fact, there are three main burial sites of the Xiaohe archaeological culture I'm going to talk today. They are the Xiaohe Cemetery, the Gumugo Cemetery just to the north of it, and distant North Keriahe Cemetery to the west of these two cemeteries. So Xiaohe Cemetery is located on the small river to the east of it, and Gumugo Cemetery is located on the bank of the Peacock River to the north of the Xiaohe Cemetery, in the Lop-Nor Desert. In fact, there are 9 cemeteries in this eastern region of the Xiaohe archaeological culture, but Gumugo and Xiaohe are the most important of them. The people of the Xiaohe archaeological culture live in desert and forest conditions. There are traces of dead forests of Tarim Plain. This is the Russian map, but it's still, I think, it is comprehensive. So these are the areas of these forests. They are partly dead, partly they're still alive. And these are some illustrations of how they look today. So they mostly grow along the banks of the rivers. Now about the chronology. Based on the radiocarbon dating, the time period of burials at the Xiaohe Cemetery range from 2000 to 1600 BC, while the time period of the Gumugo Cemetery is estimated to have been 2100 to 1800 BC. And the same radiocarbon dating gives us the time period of burials of the Keliahe or Keriahe North Cemetery, which is also designated in some scientific papers as Kungang 3 or Beifang Mudi in Chinese or Ayala Mazar in Uyghur. So the dates range from 1900 to 1500 BC. That is the Xiaohe cemetery archaeological culture, generally dated to the first half of the second millennium BC. And this is the table of the similarities of the burial customs between the Xiaohe cemetery and the Gumugo cemetery. So I'm not going to enumerate them. You can just read it from this table, for example, after the report. And there are also some differences of burial customs between the Xiaohe cemetery and the Gumugo cemetery. They are listed here also in the second table. And this is the general process, the illustration of the general process of burying the dead in the Xiaohe cemetery. So we have 7 stages. They are listed here. And this is the general process of burying the dead in the Gumugo cemetery. It contains 5 stages, and they are also enumerated here. And this is the other table. It compares the characteristics of Xiaohe cemetery and of the North Kiriahe cemetery, or Ayala Mazar in Uyghur. So we see here the similarities and the differences, and you can get the details yourselves. Now, talking about the Xiaohe cemetery, it looks like the wood of Lingus. The same wood of Lingus is present at Keliahe or Kiriahe North Cemetery, Ayala Mazar or Baifan Khmudi. And this is the plan from above. There are 5 layers of the coffins discovered at Xiaohe Cemetery, 5 chronologically different layers. So there are 2 main types of burials in Xiaohe Cemetery, male and female, but both of them are made in yoni-shaped graves. Here you can see the photo of these 2 types, the male and the female burials. The same 2 main types of burials, male and female, in yoni-shaped graves are present at Keliahe or Kiriahe North Cemetery. The O-shaped female posts are placed near each male grave, again yoni-shaped. And this is the illustration of the typical yoni-shaped coffin of Xiaohe Cemetery. And also we can find the wooden coffins of the other kind. They are just rectangular. So it is their illustration. And there are some photos of these rectangular wooden coffins of the Xiaohe Cemetery. And the same rectangular coffins are also present at Keliahe or Kiriahe North Cemetery. These are all the photos of the Xiaohe Cemetery coffins. You can see many O-shaped posts. They're placed near each male yoni-shaped graves. There are also some wooden statues at Xiaohe Cemetery. Some of them are epiphytic. And this is one of the female posts from Keliahe or Kiriahe North Cemetery. And these are also wooden statues from Xiaohe Cemetery. And similar statues made of wood were discovered at Keliahe or Kiriahe North Cemetery. Here we have the comparison of the Kumgang 3 statues and the statue from Northern Cemetery. They are almost identical. So Kumgang 3 site is the same as this North Kiriyahe or Kiliyahe cemetery. And we also have some photographs of Xiaohe Cemetery, 3-meter high wooden statues. And Gumugo Cemetery has wooden and stone figurines dated to circa 1800 BC. Here are the photos of these figurines. And again, male posts and female or planks from these two cemeteries. I mean, the Xiaohe Cemetery and the Kiriyahe Cemetery. Now, what is typical for the Xiaohe Cemetery is that typical female yoni-shaped grave has a wooden linga in it. It is placed on the dead body or just next to it. This is the typical set of burial equipment you can see here of a woman. So, but the linga model is a necessary element of it, as well as grass basket. So this is the other photo of the other typical female yoni-shaped grave with a wooden linga in it. It is placed just on the chest of the deceased person. And one more typical female yoni-shaped grave. The wooden linga is placed next to the left hand of the deceased woman. So, and these are wooden lingas. They're composite. They have two halves, and they're bound together. And also they have some feathers or some strings inside. These are all wooden lingas from Xiaohe Cemetery, but these are very similar linga models from the North Kiriyahe Cemetery. They are almost identical. Sometimes a snake or a lizard was put inside the two halves of the phallus, and we can compare this detail with snake cults in the Bactria Margiana civilization of the southern Central Asia, of Mergarh cemetery, of Matio Harappa, where we have cobra depictions, the Rigveda, where we have such characters as Ahivritra, Ahibudhya, and etc. And the Atharva Veda Shaunakya, we have some snakes, including cobra also. So these are the illustrations of the female clay figurines from Mergarh period 1, that is the earliest levels of Mergarh site. And we have their clay figurines of female with the depictions of the snakes crawling up or down the body of the woman. And the very same, very similar female clay figurine was discovered at Karadepe, dated several millennium later to the Namazga 3 period, that is early 3rd millennium BC. The same snake crawling up the female body. And to compare with Matio Harappa, we have Matio Harappan chimeras on the seals of the Matio Harappa with the depiction of a snake-shaped tail, cobra-like or just snake-like. One more. And this is the explanation of the complex figure of this Matio Harappan chimera. And turning to the Bactria Margiana civilization of the southern Central Asia, we have great many depictions of the snake cult. This is the reconstructed mosaic wall panel composition. It is from southern Turkmenistan, Margiana, from North Ganur, Royal Necropolis, tomb 3210. And this is one of the stone seals from Margiana also, with the depiction of a snake. And one more seal in the seal from Margiana, and an ivory snake from the burial 3155 from Ganur-Depe. Ganur-Depe is the capital city of the Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex. And these are snake cult evidence from Ganur-Depe, a large fragment of an ivory handle, a bronze knife with a handle, decorated in the form of two snakes, a three-dimensional image of a snake made of ivory, and a similar image on a fragment of local ceramics. And talking about the male symbols, we have early Harappan male clay figurines, for example, like this one from Nolshara 1B site next to Ergarh, dated to circa 2900 BCE. Or some mature Harappan male symbols, such as this linga, or male figurines with the depiction of the male features. So each uni-shaped grave at Selkirk Cemetery is tightly covered by cow skins, 2 or 3 cow skins. These are the photos demonstrating this. Coffins were wrapped in cowhide, raw cowhide, before being buried. As the cowhide dried out, it shrunk, sealing the coffin. What is interesting at Selkirk Cemetery is that each male linga post is covered red at the top, at least. Outside the tomb coffin, in front of the male and female post, there is usually a 4 or 5 meters high, whole body painted red poplar wood pillar, and the end of the pillar is painted with red bull head or sheep head. Also, reeds, ephedra, camel thorns are planted at the roots, and sheep bones, cow dung, grass baskets, etc. are placed around it. So they are cultic posts, not just ordinary emblems. The posts of Selkirk Cemetery in different periods are arranged high and low, forming a forest of red wooden pillars. The Rigveda, turning to Rigveda, comparing with the Rigveda reflects the cult of the Divine Father in its oldest part, an important element of which is the nascent Jyotirlingam, or pillar of light protocol, in the role of which the flame of Agni functions on the bosom of the altar, or its deva forms such as Indra, Savitar, or Soma. The corresponding term, linga, has not yet been coined. Instead, descriptive expressions and words such as rod, vetas, or pila, skambha are used, both in the Rigveda and the Atharva Veda Shaunaki. Turning to Selkirk Cemetery, the typical male burial necessarily has some arrows in it, and we can compare this feature with the widespread use of arrows and bows in the pre-Harappa and mature Harappa, and in the Rigveda and the Atharva. This is one more photo. And more. All are from Selkirk Cemetery. The arrows are not real, they're symbolic, the same as bows. But they are undoubtedly arrows, the models of arrows and bows. They're decorated. And turning to the mature Harappa, we have numerous seals with the depictions of the bowman with a bow and an arrow in it. These are seals from Mohenjo-Daro, and these are the same or similar seals from Harappa. And in the low row, we have one seal from Chanhudara with 2 bowmen. Now, the usual position of the corpse of the Selkirk archaeological culture burials is that the corpse is stretched out on the back like in this photo. And this is the typical position of the body of the deceased person. And we can also draw a comparison with the South Asian archaeology of prehistory. Here are two maps drawn by Prabhakar. It gives us data on extended inhumations on the back of the mature Harappa and the late Harappa. So they were widespread. And these are some typical photographs of these burials of mature Harappa. The corpse is stretched out on the back in typical mature Harappan graves. But what is more interesting is that the traces of the red-colored wooden coffins, pay attention to the red color, were found in some of the graves at cemetery R37 of mature Harappa in Harappa. Circa 2400 to 2000 BC. And these are the illustration of some of these wooden coffins from this R37 cemetery of Harappa itself. So the traces of coffins were indicated by dark staining in the sediment, and wooden coffins also had some form of lid made of reeds or wood. Now let us turn to the description of the sacrificial post during the Ashwamedha in the Rig Veda. This is the original, and we also have Yelizarenkova's translation. Who cuts down the pillar as well as who carries the pillar, who carves the pommel for the horse pillar, who collects what you need to prepare a racehorse. So we know that sacrificial posts were erected during the Ashwamedha, according to the Rig Veda. We also have the description of numerous sacrificial posts in the Rig Veda, again, the original and Yelizarenkova's translation. The bright dawns stand in the east like pillars erected on sacrifices. So we know that in the Rigvedic culture, numerous sacrificial posts were erected on sacrificial grounds. We also have the description of numerous sacrificial posts during the Purusha Medha in the Rig Veda, in the family core of the Rig Veda. Again, the original and the Yelizarenkova's translation. You even freed the bound Shunakshepa from 1,000 sacrificial pillars. So the human sacrifice was also made next to great many sacrificial pillars. And we also have the description of numerous sacrificial posts during the inhumation in the Rig Veda. We have two verses of the burial hymn. This is the original of verse 12, 10 mandala hymn 18. And the Yelizarenkova's translation is the following. After all, 1,000 pillars must be erected. May your chambers ooze with sacrificial oil. May he have refuge here forever and ever. Here the poet addresses the deceased person. And the next verse 13, and the translation. I'm strengthening the earth around you. May I not hurt by laying this lamp. Let the fathers hold this pillar for you. Let Yama build you a house. So we know that at least one pillar was erected while burying the dead person, according to the Rig Veda, and the burial itself was surrounded by a great many pillars. And what is more interesting, the sacrificial posts in the Rig Veda are horned. And we have this description in the family core of the Rig Veda. This is the original text and the Yelizarenkova's translation. They look like the horns of horned pillars with tops on the ground. So in the Rig Veda, a sacrifice is described as being performed at large trees or pillars made of them in different chronological layers of the Samhita. And in the Rig Veda, we have a whole hymn dedicated to the sacrificial pillar identified with a large tree. Yelizarenkova's translation is the following. Those who love the gods or tree smear you with divine sweetness during this ceremony. When you stand up straight, give me riches here, or when you rest in the bosom of this mother. Erected in front of the lit fire, rise or tree on the surface of the earth, erected by beautiful erection. It's been lifted up. You who were dug in by men striving for the gods, or hewn with an axe or tree, these divine pillars, so numerous sacrificial pillars are described, that stood up, that were cut down on the ground, that were dug in, to whom sacrificial spoons are stretched out. So these sacrificial pillars, they are being sacrificed with sacrificial spoons. Lined up in rows, pillars dressed in light, raised before fire poets arrived to us. They look like horned horns, pillars with tops on the ground. And the hymn ends with an appeal to the tree cut down for the sacrificial pillar. O tree, grow up with 100 branches, you who brought this sharpened axe. And it is also called the hoisted banner of the right. Now turning to the Selkha archaeological culture, in addition to more than 190 pillars, including decorated with horns pillars at Selkha Cemetery, there are two ground sacrificial altars with a diameter of about 2 meters of 6 wooden columns each. The skull and or horns of a bull are tied to them with a rope of grass. It is very important, as we also see that there were some sacrificial grounds in the Rig Veda placed next to burials. So two very exact coincidences, which are not in fact the coincidence, but the similarities of the Selkha and very exact similarities of the Selkha burial tradition and the Rigvedic burial tradition. 7 mud shell wooden tombs with boat-shaped wooden coffins inside were also used at Selkha Cemetery. Most of the tomb owners were women. 6 or 4 tall painted mahogany pillars are erected around it, and bull heads are hung at the ends of the pillars. So we can see the photo of one of these pillars. And some more illustrations. They are painted red, and they are dated to 1650 to 1450 BC. Also, at Selkha Cemetery, cow or bull horns are put into some of the burials. And this is the photography of the burial with bull horns dated to 1650 to 1450 BC from Selkha Cemetery. There is clearly an identical funeral rite in the Rig Veda and in the Selkha archaeological culture. The common features are a sacrifice at the pillars in the cemetery, a corpse laying, and a forest of horned grave pillars. Also, during the inhumation in the Rig Veda, the Mother Earth is asked to take the dead as her child. These are the original verses. And this is the Yelizarenko translation. Crawl into this Mother Earth, a vast friendly earth. Make way, earth, don't push. Be an easy entrance for him, an easy refuge. As the mother of a son, with the edge of her clothes, cover him of earth. So at Selkha Cemetery, the very form of the grave in the Mother Earth is again yoni-shaped. The Rig Veda reflects the cult of the Divine Mother, deeply developed among the Rigvedic Indo-Aryans, the main component of which is the veneration of the female womb, which is designated mostly by the terms yoni and upastha, but there are also some other terms. So in total, the word yoni and its derivatives occur 155 times in the Rig Veda. Another term for the womb is the word upastha, which occurs in the Rig Veda 64 times. That is, judging by only the use of these two terms, the womb is mentioned in the Rig Veda almost 220 times, frequently and in all chronological layers of the text. The important part of the Rigvedic cult of the mother is the cult of Mother Earth. So Mother Earth is only one of the numerous aspects of the Rigvedic divine mother. Earth, or Prithvi, as an aspect of the mother, they call to be with a good womb, which is Siona, Prithvi Bhava. Plowing and sowing are considered as insemination of this womb. Harness plows with seeders, put on collars, throw the seed into the prepared womb here. The cult of the womb of Mother Earth is much more clearly outlined in the Atharva Veda Shaunakya in comparison with the Rig Veda. May your hills, the mountains, your forest thickets or earth be Sionam, which is with literally with a good yoni. Earth, the all-given mother of herbs, the stable earth, Sionam kind, with good yoni. Your eastern regions, your northern regions, O earth, from the south and what from the west, may they be Sionas, again with good yoni. Friendly, fragrant, soft Siona with good yoni. Let the earth intercede for me. May your wombs, upasthas, numerous, be created for us, O earth. The land is soft, Siona, again with good yoni, for us, a soft Siona abode. So several times repeated the term yoni. The oldest funeral rite of the Rigvedic Aryans was inhumation. See the mention of the grave in the family mandala of the Samhita. I wouldn't like, O Varuna, to go to an earthen house, O king. Forgive, O good Lord, have mercy. Death, burial, including inhumation, disappearance, and destruction, naturally considered by the authors of the Rig Veda as a return to the womb of the Divine Mother's aspect, called non-existence plane with light. That is Devi Neritis. It has Nerita Rupasthi, the yoni of the non-existent. This corresponds to the Rigvedic concept of death, namely the return to the mother's womb. This is the original verse. The important form of the cult of the mother in the Rig Veda and in the pre-Harappan and Harappan culture is the cult of the tree. In one particularly interesting case, in the oldest part of the text of the Rig Veda, a tree is compared with a woman about to give birth, fifth mandala, family core. The tree in the Rig Veda is regarded as cosmogonic matter. What was the wood and what was the tree from which they carved heaven and earth? The Atharva Veda Shaunakya addresses the dead. Let the tree not oppress you, nor the great divine earth. Having found a place for yourself among the fathers, prosper among those whose kin is Yama. In this verse, one can see a reference to the laying of a corpse in the ground in a wooden coffin. At Selha Cemetery, in the northern part of the cemetery, the wooden tomb is composed of a wooden rectangular tomb chamber. It is only one. On both sides of the front wall of the tomb, there are 7 layers of cattle heads, neatly stacked, and a wooden pillar carved with spiral pattern stands in front of the tomb passage. This is the photo of this unique tomb of Selha Cemetery. And you see the 7 layers of cattle heads from both sides. At Selha Cemetery, one male was buried with 7 snakes on his chest. The Rig Veda also mentions 7 serpents, or Danus, Sapta Danun. At Gumugo Cemetery, 6 solar patterns with 7 circles of wooden posts were discovered at the burial site, dated to 1800 to 1700 BC. These are the illustrations, the photographs. these 7 circles of wooden posts with the evident solar symbolism. Number 7 is the core of the symbolic teaching of the Rig Veda. In the Rig Veda, we have 7 horses of Surya and 7 Suryas, among a great many other mentions of the number 7. And now we are turning to the septenary characters of the mature Harappan civilization. This is the famous seal from Mohenjo-daro with the depiction of 7 characters, figures. And one more similar septenary depiction from Harappa. If the Indians penetrated into Tarim through southern Central Asia, and anthropologists talk about repeated migrations here from the Indus Valley, then an important link in this chain is the royal necropolis of Ganur-Depe site, with the burials of 7 men, with 7 dogs, and a vessel of 7 spherical parts, with 7 ribs of a bull, and with a pommel for a staff with 7 slits. So several times we have number 7 repeated. And this is the photo of this burial. And here in the corner, you can see this 7-fold bronze vessel made up of 7 spheres. One more picture, a photo, one more, and more. Now, turning to the Seohe cemetery, we have leather pouch with wheat and millet grains dated to 1800 to 1500 BCE. And also in the Seohe cemetery, in some grass baskets, there were cooked food like porridge made of millet and milk or dairy products. Some leather pouches from the Seohe cemetery dated to 1800 to 1500 BC contained ephedra twigs. In the Gomugo cemetery, a small pack of ephedra twigs has been found in each tomb placed upon the right front chest of the dead. Bundles of ephedra are tied to the pillars of Seohe cemetery. Ephedra twigs and branches are placed on or near each buried person. Some bodies are strewn with bunches of ephedra. Small bags with ephedra are tied to the edges of the capes. In the profane cult of the Rig Veda, a psychostimulating plant was used. Here is the famous verse of the Rig Veda and its translation by Yelizarenkova. They think they have tasted soma when they crush the plant. Soma that the Brahmins know no one eats it. Through Tarim, Indo-Europeans probably contacted with China. This is the pan dish from the Chu Kingdom of China. It is identified as the Ashwin's chariot of the Rig Veda, because both have 3 wheels. At Seohe cemetery, the coffins look like boats turned upside down, especially male coffins with female oar-posts near them. Vyacheslav Selchevanov, professor in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures and the Program of Indo-European Studies at University of California in Los Angeles, and also full member of the Russian Academy of Sciences and foreign fellow of the British Academy, states that of the terms that important for understanding the early Baltic Slavic Germanic burial ritual, especially noteworthy are the Latvian nāve, death, Lithuanian nove, death, torment, novity, torment, kill, Prussian novis, umf, that is the designation of the body of the dead, Old Russian navi, Gothic naus, Old Icelandic nar, the body of a dead man, The word is limited to the Baltic Slavic Germanic area, which clearly indicates the commonality of ideas about death and the corresponding rituals among these particular groups of Indo-Europeans. And it seems that this circumstance should be taken into account in every possible way in the ethnic interpretation of burials in the areas of possible ancient settlement of these 3 groups. The well-known data on the role of a boat or a sheep in the funeral rite among the same tribes make it very likely that a comparison with the common Indo-European name sheep sounded almost the same. The transformation of the sheep or goat now into one of the most important elements of the burial rite could be considered as an essential ethno-linguistic feature of the entire Baltic Slavic Germanic area, distinguishing it from other zones. In a number of Indo-European cultures, a sacred river and a sacred boat play a very important role in transporting the dead from the world of living beings to the underworld. Compare Greek, Slavic, Germanic burial customs. Talking about ancient Greece, we have many depictions of Charon, who is the transporter, a boatman and a transporter of dead people from the world of living beings to the underworld. And we have the depiction of this on Arctic white ground lithothys from different museums dated to the 5th century BCE. So I'm not going to speak much about this, just look at the illustrations and the explanation. Now let us turn to the Scandinavian and Germanic burial tradition. The distribution map of the Germanic boat graves, both cremation and inhumation in northern Atlantic Europe and in Iceland. And here is the distribution map of the Viking period boat inhumation graves in northern Europe. So, and some of the most remarkable of them. The Snape Anglo-Saxon ship burial in Suffolk, East Anglia, dated to circa 550 AD. The ship remains from Mount One at the early 7th century Anglo-Saxon burial ground at Sutton Hoo, East Anglia, and the same burial. The Oseberg ship is a Viking ship dated to 800 to 840 AD. It was discovered in a large burial mound at the Oseberg farm near Tonsberg in Vestfold, Norway. And this is the whole reconstruction of this ship exhibited at the Viking Ship Museum. The Gokstad ship is a Viking ship found in a burial mound at Gokstad in Sandefjord, Vestfold, Norway. It is displayed at the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, Norway. It is the largest preserved Viking ship in Norway. The Gokstad ship was built in about 850 AD and was used for the burial about the year 900 AD. And this is its reconstruction in the museum. The Tuna ship is a Viking ship around AD 900, exhibited in the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo. It was discovered in a ship burial mound in Tuna parish. The Ledby ship burial at the village of Ledby near Kerteminde in Denmark dated after 900 AD. Now, turning to the East Slavs, we have Borshevsky mounds of the Don Slavs, where I live, by the way, of the East Slavic tribe Vyatchi, dated to 700 to 1000 AD. They have ring ditches around them, wooden burial chambers in the mounds, and wooden fences around the mounds. The burial chambers have 3 walls, and 2 pillars are dug in at the entrance. In the ditches around the Borshevsky burial mounds of the Don Slavs of the East Slavic tribe Vyatich, or if there were none, then wooden pillars were installed directly into the ground. They outlined the mound and stopped at the entrance to the burial chamber. And this is the illustration, burial mound 11 of Borshevsky necropolis. We see wooden pillars encircling the burial chamber with 4 cremated bones, and burial mound 15 of the same necropolis. with the similar wooden pillars surrounding the burial place. The images of water, or river, or ocean, and boat or ship abound in the Rig Veda and in the Atharva Veda Shaunakya, which indicates a good knowledge of the sea and ship. In the Rig Veda, water also acts as a symbol of danger, trouble, darkness, narrowness. And the boat, especially the boat of Devas, ferries through it. But boat burials are not mentioned in the Rig Veda. It means that the Tarim people of the Saukhe archaeological culture were relatives of the Rigvedians and Proto-Greeks according to their funeral rite. Compare the myth of Karen and Styx River in the underworld, but developed a special funeral cult, later characteristic of the Jumena Balta Slavs. The Arab traveler Ibn Fadlan describes the sanctuary of the Rus in Bulgar on the Middle Volga with numerous wooden pillars dated to 921 to 922 AD. Each comes out with bread, meat, onions, milk, and intoxicating drink, approaches a vertically placed long log with a face similar to a human face. Around this log are smaller idols, and behind these idols are long logs vertically dug into the ground. He goes up to the big idol and bows to him, then leaves water with him in front of this piece of wood. He comes again with a gift for the second and third time. He carries a gift to each image from these little images and asks them for intercession and says, "These are wives of our Lord and his daughters and his sons," and does not stop turning to one image after another, asking them and begging them for intercession and humbly bowing before them. He says, "My Lord has fulfilled my need and I should reward him." He takes a few sheep or cows, kills them, distributes some of the meat, and brings the rest, and pay attention, throws it in front of the larger and smaller idols surrounding it, and compare it with the Saukhe cemetery, hangs the heads of the killed cows or sheep on logs vertically dug into the ground. So a very similar description of the sacrificial posts and sacrifices made at them. And now we have the illustration of wooden pillars of two sanctuaries of the East Slavic tribe of the Radimichi of the 10th century AD, near the village of Khodasovichi on the left bank of the Dnieper River near the Holy Lake. We have bonfires and wooden pillars surrounding the place of sacrifices. And this is the Perun sanctuary in Peryn, near Veliki Novgorod in northern Russia. Perun is an equivalent to Baltic Perkunas and the Rigvedic Parjanya. The tale of bygone years under the year 980 contains a story about the sanctuary in Veliki Novgorod built by the order of Vladimir Sviatoslavich. Vladimir placed Dobrynya, his uncle, in Novgorod, and having come to Novgorod, Dobrynya set the idol of Perun over the Volkhov River, and the Novgorodians sacrificed to him as to God. And the same tale of bygone years under the very same year contains a story about the similar sanctuary in Kiev, built by Vladimir Sviatoslavich himself. And he placed idols on the hill outside the palace, a Perun, which is Parjanya in the Rigveda, in wood with a silver head and gold mustache, and horse Dashtbog, which is Dada Tiphaga in the Rigveda, and Stribog and Sea Margal and Makash. And they offered sacrifices and called them gods. Then, under the year 983, the same tale of bygone years narrates about Vladimir Sviatoslavich. He went to Kiev offering sacrifices to idols. And there was then a Varangian. And the Varangian said, "These are not gods, but a tree. Today there is, and tomorrow it will rot. They do not eat, do not drink, do not speak, but are made of wood by hand." So the riddle of the Saukhe cemetery is how these typical Caucasoids with Indo-European culture and the Rigvedic burial and ritual practices of South Asian origin got to the Tarim Basin. This is one of the most famous mummies of the Saukhe archaeological culture, the Princess of Saukhe, from tomb 11, dated to circa 1800 BCE. 1800 BCE. It has blonde hair, long eyelashes, high cheekbones, and pale skin typical for modern Indo-Europeans of Europe. What is else interesting is that this mummy has chunks of cheese on her neck and chest. And even her entire body and boots were coated in a white substance, likely also a dairy product. So if we turn to the Rigveda, we have the description of the dead forefathers having hot milk as afterlife food. These are the original verses, and this is the Gelizarenkova's translation. O Agni, come with easily found fathers to our lands with true kavyas sitting around hot milk. The true ones who eat and drink sacrificial libations, taken by Indra, the gods on one chariot. O Agni, come with 1,000 praises of the gods, with distant former fathers sitting near hot milk. So a very similar description. And I think that the key to this riddle is to make Kichichik cemetery of the Keltiminar Neolithic culture in the Sarakamish-Amudarya Delta to the south of the Aral Sea. It has some burials. There are 28 individual burials dated to 5 and 4,000 BCE. They were uncovered in narrow ground pits of an oval or rectangular shape. Burials were carried out in an elongated position on the back, with arms stretched out along the body, in most cases with a sprinkling of red ochre under the skeleton. And which is interesting, in some cases, the layer of pure ochre under the skeleton was from 2 to 5 centimeters. Often traces of red ochre sprinkling turned out to be on the toe of the burial, of the buried person. So these are the illustrations of the burials of Tumek Kichijik Neolithic burial site. And pay attention to this illustration. This burial of a female, and it has neck pendant made of boar's tusk placed just under her skull. And there were some more neck pendants made of boar's tusks in female graves. And we can compare this with the Rigveda, where the cult of the boar is characteristic. That is, Maruts are wild boars. Marut's father is boar Rudra. Soma is a wild boar, and Angirasas are wild boars. And we also have the boar cult in the Bactria Margiana civilization. These are two expressions of it: a bronze ritual axe in the shape of a boar from burial 2760 of the Ganur necropolis, and silver with gold foil axe head of the same culture, now at Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Also, some burials of Tumek Kichijik Cemetery had a burial pottery or fragments of it. And we compare this feature with the Atharva Veda Shaunakya, which addresses the dead. Pots covered with tortillas that the gods kept for you. May they be to you full of swadha, full of honey, oozing fat. Now, Leonid Theodorovich Yablonsky, a Soviet and Russian archaeologist, paleoanthropologist, head of the Department of Scythian Sametian Archaeology of the Institute of Archaeology of the Russian Academy of Sciences, Doctor of Historical Sciences and Professor, states that the ancestors of the Celtiminarians of Tumek Kichijik were of the Mediterranean or Proto-Mediterranean anthropological type and advanced to the north, where they came into contact with the carriers of the northern Proto-European anthropological type. There is a significant similarity of the male series of Tumek-Kichujik with the series of Yamna and Srubnya Steppe Bronze Age cultures. The Celtimerians apparently took a direct part in the process of shaping the anthropological appearance of the population of the steppe in the Bronze Age. The head of the ethnoarchaeology sector of the Institute of Ethnology and Anthropology of the Russian Academy of Sciences Vinogradov states, it was already mentioned in my previous report, but I should repeat it here because it is important. The alluvial plains of Central Asia were populated from the south with the penetration of such a specific type of flint products as chondropizoids from the pre-ceramic Mirgarh through northern Afghanistan, northeastern Iran, southeastern Caspian, southern Central Asia, and the Aral Sea to the left bank of the Volga, southern western Siberia, and eastern Balkhash. And these are flint trapezoids, chondropizoids from Mirgarh I period, and one more burial with them. And the distribution map, so they were distributed through the Celtimerians habitation area. And one more repetition of the previous report, Neolithic migration from Mirgarh period 1 through the southeastern Caspian region and southern Central Asia spread the stone irons or polishes up to the Dnieper forests of Eastern Europe, the Urals, Western Siberia, and Altai. These are these irons or polishes made of stone from Mirgarh period 1. And this is the map of the distribution, again through the Celtimerians habitation area. Now, the placing of the dead onto a 2 to 5 centimeters layer of red ochre and the sprinkling of the corpse with the same in the burials of the Tumek-Kichujik burial ground dated to 5th and 4th thousand BCE correspond to the abundant sprinkling of the floor of the burial chamber, inventory, and the body of the deceased with red ochre, and even the placement of lumps of ochre in the grave in Mirgarh site. Ochre means symbolic fire, and it is dated from circa 7000 BCE. So I propose three variants of the suggested migration from the homeland at the border region between Iran and Hindustan to Europe with a deviation to Tarim. This is the first one. So they moved from the territory west of the Indus River to the south of the Aral Sea, then to Europe, but some part of them deviated eastwards and eventually came to Xiaohe region. But we also know that in historic time, there were several road routes of Silk Road crossing the mountainous regions between the Tarim Plain and the Indus Plain. So it is possible that these routes were in use even greatly earlier. Then there is the second variant of the suggested migration. So while some parts of the Proto-Germanic, Proto-Slavic, and Proto-Baltic tribes went directly to Europe through the Aral region, some part of them deviated and moved through the mountains of the Tibet and Hindu Kush and Himalayas to the Xiaohe region. In the Xiaohe cemetery, there appear two Indian maternal lineages, among many others. Layers 1 to 4 had individuals, both male and female, with maternal haplogroups U7 and M5 common in South Asian population, which means that at least some people of the Xiaohe archaeological culture were of South Asian origin. According to Fritz Stahl, there is a possibility that the Rigveda, the second mandala of Rigveda, which declares that Indra by his power caused the Indus to flow northward, mentions the only region where the Indus flows in this direction, namely north of Mount Kailas. The Rigvedic Indo-Aryans might have discovered it if and when they went upstream to the source of their greatest river. This is the original verse. Sadancham Sindhum Arinan Mahitva. Tatiana Yakovlevna Yelizarenko admits the translation of the famous German interpreter Karl Geldner Erlis den Sindhu Nordwärts fließen, which is in English, he led the Indus flow to the north. Mount Kailas is located in western Tibet, less than 100 miles north of the Himalayan range. From Mount Kailas, the Indus flows north and then northwest until it turns south and reaches Punjab. We have this map of Mount Kailas, and the Indus River has its source just to the north of Mount Kailas. So, and this is the closer map. We see Mount Kailas and the sources of the Indus River. Now, we know that people inhabited this area greatly earlier. Thus, a fireplace dated by radiocarbon to circa 4800 to 4600 BC has been excavated in Ladakh, Leh district of Jammu and Kashmir, in the upper Indus Valley, which is not far from the sources of the Indus River, near the caved dwellings. So this is the map. That is why we have the third variant of the suggested migration from homeland to Europe with the deviation to Tarim, which means that there were two currents of people moving to Salhe region from the same homeland, but by different routes. According to Merrin criteria, coming to conclusions, the Salhe archaeological culture is derived from Hindustan and or from the Rigvedic culture. The common features are lingam and yoni cult, breeding of cows, goats, and sheep, cultivation of grain, archery, use of a plant psychoactive substance, symbolism of water, boat, and sheep, sacrifice at the pillars, corpse laying in wooden coffins stretched out on the back, numerous funeral pillars decorated with horns, solar cult with septenary symbols, cult of snakes. The male haplogroup R1A is also common. But the boat coffins of the Tarim people of the Salhe archaeological culture reveal in them a group related to the ancestors of the Jumene Balta Slavs, which after leaving the border of South Asia and Iran deviated to the northeast or east. In Tarim, in the cemeteries of the Salhe archaeological culture, wooden models of phalluses were not only found in wooden coffins of women, but also a large pillar with a thickened and painted with red paint on top was installed next to each female grave, undoubtedly symbolizing the lingam. The Rigveda and the Atharvaveda Shaunakya directly mention the earthen womb, the grave of Mother Earth, and the same pillars lingams. In a pair, they, as in the necropolises of Salhe archaeological culture, function as physical signs of the union of the Divine Father and Mother, of the union of birth, symbolized by pillar lingam, and death, symbolized by earthen womb grave. This is also the origin of the traditional idea for Shaivism about the permanent stay of Shiva, initially in the form of a lingam pillar in the cemetery. The funeral rite of inhumation described by the Rigveda and the Atharvaveda Shaunakya assumed the erection of a sacrificial pillar, protolingam, next to the grave yoni. This is confirmed by similar practices in the cemeteries of Salhe archaeological culture in Tarim, which later, when inhumation was replaced by cremation, which is mentioned in increasing progression in both the late Mandala 10 of the Rigveda and the Atharvaveda Shaunakya, and the association of lingam with Rudra Shiva gave rise to the idea of the permanent habitation of the latter in places of cremation. Initially, the role of the Jyotirlingam was performed by a pillar of Agni flame, then by its substitute, a pillar with red painted top or surface. So this is the end of my report, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, so let me start with some question that I have in mind. Do you have any material to as why to like further dig upon why the place of the lingam in when burying a woman in these type of inhumation cultures? Do you have any material that we can read upon and know more detail about this? Why what is the reasoning behind putting a lingam in the grave?
According to the archaeologists, who excavated these Selche archaeological culture cemeteries. These lingams are both the model of lingers in the graves and the lingam posts. They symbolized man power, very important for the people living in desert conditions. So the population was not numerous, and children were badly needed for these communities. That's why they placed these male symbols in each female grave and surrounded it also with male posts. But it doesn't exclude the more deeper and more ancient tradition of veneration of the Divine Father and Divine Mother union, which we trace in the Rig Veda, where we also have the proto-lingam cult of the Agni flame, which is described as Hiranya Vedas, for example, in the Atharva Veda, and great many mentions of the yoni of the Divine Mother. So it was, I think it was parallel in the Tarim Selche culture.
Also, one more follow-up question: do you also think the inhumation or the burial activity was something that was taken forward from these cultures into the Abrahamic cultures as well, or how do you think? Do you think this concept of inhumation in the Abrahamic religions was taken from these cultures, or do you think it would have parallelly occurred in those religions?
Yes, I understand you. Thank you for your question, but it wasn't taken from the South Asian cultures because the inhumation burial tradition has very deep roots starting from Paleolithic, even when there were not yet Homo sapiens. They already had inhumations, such as in Israel and in some other places. So inhumation burial tradition is very, very remote and old. But what I have tried to demonstrate in my previous reports, that Matteo Harappa had a very archaic mode of inhumation, that is the inhumation of the person laying on its back, stretched, which predates the inhumation on one side in a crouched position, which was made definitely first somewhere in the Near East and spread eastwards. And it reached Mergarh, where we have this crouched position of the dead bodies. But in the Sindhu Valley, we have on the back position of inhumation. And I suppose that it was earlier, and that the people who came to make Kichijik, Erel necropolis, and then to the Selche region, they also have this inhumation on the back and stretched position. So it is probably the derivative of a much older burial tradition of inhumation, which is not yet recorded in South Asia. Earlier than Matteo Harappa. We have it in Matteo Harappa and post-Matteo. Famous Sanoli necropolises. We also have here inhumation in stretched positional line on the back. And we also have wooden coffins in Sinoli cemetery. But we do not yet have the earlier than Matteo Harappan inhumations in this position in India yet. Maybe they will be discovered later in the future. I hope so, because it will give us the total picture of this burial tradition. But what we know that originally this inhumation burial tradition was spread in Kelteminar Neolithic culture, which was spread from the Bactria-Margiana region up to Urals and West Siberia and Altai. But then it was pushed out by the people coming from the junction of Iran and South Asia, I think from Mirgarh, and they had information in crouch position on one of the sites. It was the agricultural tradition also, and it moved further northwards into steppes, and it was predominant in the steppes of the Bronze Age. But some people, some population still had this very archaic tradition, and Tarim people were one of these groups who still were sticking to this very, very archaic, Mesolithic even by its origin, tradition of inhumation of burials lying on their back in stretched position. That is my vision of this problem.
Also, a follow-up question. Is there any reasoning about why there was this the cow with horns placed on each burial site? Is there any reasoning on that as well?
You see, the cow image and the bull image is the substitute of the mother and father cult, this divine couple, because in the ancient cultures throughout the ancient world, bull symbolized man and a cow symbolized a woman, and the symbol it's like the worship of the Divine Father and Divine Mother. We have these two symbols starting from Mirgarh and starting from Phirana, where we have both a great many figurines of bulls, zebu bulls, and we also have a great many female figurines. In pair, they were two most important symbols of these Neolithic cultures of Mirgarh and Phirana. And from here, we can trace them up to the modern, to present days in India, for example, where we still have the cult of the Divine Father and the Divine Mother, and the veneration of cow, and I think of bull. You should know it better than me because you live there. But it was spread throughout by the Indo-European tribes coming from this homeland. So Tarim people were also Indo-Europeans, and they had the same cult of the Divine Mother and the Divine Father. And also, bull symbolized strength, bull symbolized virility, bull symbolized fertility, because even in Rigveda, the bull is designated by the terms which are literally translated as sprinkling retas, that is sperm, yes? So Vrishabha and Ukshan, most common terms for bull in the Rigveda, they are connected with liquid, with moisture, which means male liquid, yes? For inseminating the cow, that is a female, that is again the sacred couple, their union, which generated the whole universe. So this symbol is very deep, in fact, very deep. And by the way, turning to Sri Aurobindo's spiritual interpretation of the Rigveda, he gives us a very elaborated and detailed explanation of this bull and cow cult in the Rigveda in a deepest spiritual level. So bull is Purusha, that is the highest self of the universe. It is inside people and inside everything, and it is the highest goal of the human inspiration. And cow is the symbol of the Divine Mother par excellence, which is Aditi goddess. Aditi goddess is identified with Usha's goddess in Rigveda, because Usha's in the Rigveda is described as the face of the Aditi goddess, and Aditi goddess is everything in the Rigveda. It is, you can read it in the Rigveda text that Aditi is identified with everything. So Aditi is all that surrounds us. We live in Aditi. We live in its yoni. It is literal, it is almost physical. So this is a very deep cult, both spiritually and materially. And speaking about the economic reasons, of course, the productive economy, the exploitation of cattle was very important for the living of these communities of Indo-Europeans. So they depended on bulls and cows in everything. And they used everything from them: meat, skin, bones, dung, horns, everything was used. And that's why this importance. So it is a very many-sided importance, spiritual, economical, and so on. That is my explanation.